Dragon Riders, Kaze no Kaeru, by Night Dragon 0. Jade's perspective. This was the place. I could feel it in my soul. I'd flown through sharp twists and turns of the canyon, and was now hovering in front of a huge metal door. It looked as if it had been built into the huge mountain itself. Decorating the river nearby were several Charizard statues. I was wondering if I should go and bang through the door when suddenly it creaked open. Standing there was a huge old Charizard accompanied by a female human. "I think it's a wild one," the green-haired female spoke to the Charizard. "You want to handle this yourself?" The Charizard nodded, spreading his wings and flying up to me. "I am the Elder of the Charcific Valley," he said. "Do you seek to train here?" "Yes," I nodded. He must have noticed I was looking down to the female human below. "Human Theresa owns none of us, if that's what you're thinking. She and her family keep other humans away. She is a good friend to the Charizard. You have nothing to fear from her." The Elder had said it in such a way that I immediately believed him. He was ages older than me, and certainly did look very battle-worn. It was intimidating, facing a potentially more experienced opponent, but I had to hold my ground. "I have come to train here," I repeated. "Very well. Come!" He led me through the doors and into the valley itself. It was a truly magnificent sight. The mountains, rocky valley, caverns, and rivers all untouched by the human world, except for a small house where the human female apparently lived. Of course it was filled with Charizard. Most of them were gigantic, and all heads turned towards me as we flew to the center of the valley. "As with tradition, you will be tested before you are allowed to join us," the Elder told me. "Who then will challenge the newcomer?" He was answered by a series of roars. However, one came flying over first. "I will battle," growled my opponent. The Elder nodded in approval and landed on the cliff to watch. "A female?" I laughed. "Watch it, tough guy. You don't know what you're getting into," she roared. "Doesn't she remind you of someone?" a voice in my head asked. However, I quickly shook it away. My opponent attacked, sending off her flamethrower. My response was to whirl myself around rapidly, using my sword stance to disperse the flames. I countered with my own flames, and she imitated my technique. Realizing I couldn't win with the fire alone, I spread my wings and soared upwards. She followed behind me, firing several bursts of flames. I abruptly bent backwards, twisting my body and changing my direction. We ended up charging towards each other, only she wasn't prepared as me. I slashed along her back, causing her to cry out in pain. Her wings flared wildly and gave me several cuts. Angered, she turned back and charged again. I did likewise, and our claws, teeth, flames, and wings clashed multiple times. Both of us were getting scarred and charred from our battle, but she seemed to be wearing down. My chance came when I saw her flying towards me, claws outstretched. I held my position and waited until the last instant, then spun round to the side of her body, grabbing her left wing at the same time. I pulled back, redirecting her force and momentum carrying her forward, face first into the mountainside, leaving an impression of her body in it. She then slipped and began falling towards the water below. I reacted almost instantaneously, folding my wings and sending myself into a steep, nearly vertical dive. For a few breathtaking seconds, it looked as if I might not be on time. However, I made it, performing a spectacular mid-air catch barely meters above the water. I just changed my direction in time, sending water flying as I skimmed along its surface. I landed and put her down on dry land. "Why did you save me?" she asked when she had caught her breath. "It was the honorable thing to do," I said. "Well fought," the Elder nodded, landing beside us. "You are indeed a formidable warrior. We would be honored to have you join us." "I'm sorry, Father. I failed you," the female Charizard said softly. "Wait, you're his—" "Don't be so surprised," the Elder laughed. "And you haven't failed," he told her. "You merely need more training. If you're lucky, he just might want to help with that." The last part had clearly been referring to me. I wouldn't miss this opportunity. "I'd be happy to," I grinned. I saw her return my smile. At last, I had a home. Not only that, a little more and I'd have myself a mate, too. Dracia's perspective. Violet City was pretty much your average human city, except for all the Christmas decorations that had been set up. Well, it was Christmas Eve, after all, and the streets were slightly more crowded than usual. I stood in the waiting area, watching Firestorm speak to the tourist agency clerk. Agua was sitting down on one of the couches, with Serac curled up in his lap. They weren't doing much of anything, so I turned around and started looking around. My gaze fell upon an Indigo Pokemon League poster. 3 months away, but registrations were already open. Serac walked up to my side and looked towards the poster too. You ever wanted to compete in the league? I asked. The Vaporeon nodded. Heh, so have I. Pity Jade was always the one who needed the training. You know that book we saw in the store window just now? The one titled The Complete Idiot's Guide to Pokemon Training? That would suit him nicely. Serac giggled softly. Then again, Storm could use that one too. I made sure I said it loudly enough for him to hear. Storm gave me an annoyed glance, but turned back to the attendant. So, is there a way I can contact Mrs. Theresa? He asked. Not very easily. However, since it's Christmas Eve, her niece should be around town and... Oh, Lisa! How fortunate! Hi, Wayne! A beautiful green-haired girl had entered the shop. Merry Christmas! You too. This gentleman here is Jade, and he needs to discuss some things with you. Firestorm had assumed Jade's identity. He'd also used Jade's email to contact Professor Oak for some information about Charizard. Of course, he hadn't spilled anything to the researcher. Oh, it's all right, Firestorm nodded. I'll let you two catch up first. He walked over to us and waited until Lisa came over. Jade, was it? She asked, shaking hands. Pleased to meet a fellow Charizard trainer. How did you know? He asked, surprised. There's a subtle scent of ash on you, Lisa explained. If you don't mind me saying that. Well, that's what I wanted to talk to you about, Storm said. You see, my Charizard had a little accident. Is he hurt? Not really. We were exploring this cave and there was a small earthquake. A rather large rock fell on his head, and after that he wasn't acting like himself. What do you mean? He actually attacked me like he didn't know who I was. After that he flew off. The knock must have affected his memory somehow. And... Firestorm stopped short, staring at the floor. I'm sorry, Lisa said, putting a hand on his shoulder. It's not your fault. Thanks, but it probably is. However, I feel I can make up for it. I know he's headed for that Charcific Valley of yours. What makes you say that? I don't know, I just feel that's where he'd go. He's always wanted to be the best, and I know it's off limits, but please, just let me search there. I don't know what I'd do without him. Although he'd practiced that speech in front of us before, it was genuinely coming from his heart this time. Don't worry, Lisa nodded firmly. It's too late now, but I'll take you to my aunt tomorrow. She'll know if any new Charizard have shown up or not. Late? Oh no! Have I held you up? Nah, don't worry, Lisa grinned. I've just got to rent a room for the night. Why don't you come along and we'll all go together in the morning? Thank you, Firestorm replied. Yeah, we greatly appreciate it, Ogwell added in. Say, I know this really great restaurant down the road. Would you like to get something to eat? Sure, Firestorm beamed. What? I nearly fainted, but reduced myself to making a vomiting motion behind his back. Sorge's perspective. Why had I done it? I often asked myself that. For a while, it seemed I'd been going down a declining path to give in to my raw instincts. It had gotten to a point where thinking had become a major pain, but that had been on my mind. Psychology is not something I really understand, but it certainly played a part here. The memories had been painful. In particular was the armband I'd torn off, not wanting to think about how they'd forced another Pokemon to mate with me. And also that armored creature I'd fought. I still saw it in my nightmares. Alagard somewhat reminded me of it, and after that incident where I'd accidentally knocked him out, he decided he wouldn't be the one to wake me from my dreams. Mewtwo. I recalled the word in my mind that seemed to associate itself with that scene. Was it that creature's name? I don't really want to find out. Time had healed me a little, but those memories still remained. Now I was part of this high-level secret Pokemon organization. I'd formed an alliance with Alagard to fight Team Rocket. Alagard, Night Slice's father. Having been genetically modified and had several genes taken from Night Slice, it sort of made me his half-sister. And looking at it that way, then Alagard was my stepfather. Damn, I had one messed up family. I'd abandoned my former persona, realizing I had to accept the fact that I was no longer human. Accept the fact that there'd be no way for me to change that, just as Scantrix had. It really pained him to talk about his human past, and I refrained from asking. But he was a great companion, and not to mention a good teacher. Even on missions, we always worked as a pair. It felt strange saying it was a good thing in a certain sense, but at least now he had someone who'd been through the same things he had. We ended up leaning on each other's shoulders for support. However, as I stood on the rooftop of a building in Seeker Town, looking down at the Christmas decorations all set up, I felt a wave of sadness coming over me. Brings back memories, doesn't it? Scantrix asked, flying down and landing beside me. Yeah, I sighed sadly, both good and bad. With his help, I'd regained my human language speaking abilities, but I admit it did rather odd on my tongue. "We think alike then," he said, walking closer to me. Allegard had given us a break from all missions involving sneaking around and battling rockets with guns. There was generally a lot of preparations and planning involved, not to mention my personal training, but we'd successfully raided and sometimes bombed several small bases belonging to Team Rocket and Silph Special Forces. We always made it look like it was an attack from the other one, thus further escalating their hatred at each other. The search for the Pokemon medal hadn't been very successful, though. This small town happened to be along our path, and, out of curiosity, we decided to stop by and take a look. We couldn't allow ourselves to be seen, of course, but if we could sneak around a heavily guarded rocket base, then a civilian town certainly wouldn't be much of a challenge. Being Christmas Eve, there were many people about on the streets below, all going about their business. There were some Pokemon too, but these were domesticated ones, of course. "Hey, want to see how to get some free burgers?" Scantrix asked. "Lead on," I smiled. Perhaps there were some good things in my life after all.